Back when I was a kid, anytime somebody would say something extraordinary, all the kids would say, "No way, for reals?" I don't know if that was just my childhood or if that happened with other kids around the world as well. Nonetheless, we are diving into project documentation, creating documentation for reals. By the time you're done here, you will be able to create relevant network documentation for your switch infrastructure. As we've been building this switch infrastructure through this series, we've been writing everything down on what I would call a paper napkin network diagram, just kind of a blank sheet of paper where we're jotting notes as we go. And sadly, this is actually where a lot of documentation stops for most engineers. With the best of intention, we slide this sheet of paper into our bag with the best of intentions in mind to come back and create some real documentation from it. The problem is 3 months later, we pull out a crumpled sheet of paper from the bottom of our bag and guiltily toss it into the garbage can with all the other crumpled up network diagrams and think to ourselves, I just don't have time to keep up with that. As network engineers, we all know it's critical to have documentation. Why does this get skipped? I would suggest there are probably 3 primary reasons. The first is there's no instant gratification. When you're configuring devices, you can actually see things come together. Stuff starts working. That's what makes this career awesome. It's like building the ultimate mousetrap game. Any of you ever play mousetrap when you were a kid? Where you put all these things in a row and then you roll your marble and you actually get to watch it take effect. It's fun because you get to see the results of all your engineering happen right before your eyes. But how many kids do you think would be excited if the instructions of the game said, okay, well, I want you to draw out this entire thing on a sheet of paper so that you can do it again in the future? The answer is no one. And that's effectively what documentation is. At the end of a deployment where everything is now working, you have to write out everything on paper, and I put paper in quotes, obviously. And after the rush of an implementation, it's just boring. So easy to justify. I'll get to that later. The second reason I believe that we don't do network documentation is because we're looking for the dream tool. Meaning, we're looking for the tool that we just click a button and it goes out and discovers all of our network and just does the documentation for us. And the fact is, if you Google that, things like automated network documentation or maintain network documentation, there's 100 different vendors trying to sell you a tool that claim to do exactly that. And I will tell you, after about 20 years of being in the network field, there is no such thing as automated network documentation. Oh, sure, there's all kinds of utilities that will spit out a list, but then it's up to you to go fix it all. And you usually end up spending more time fixing your list than you would if you just did it manually in the first place. That's why when I say the ultimate documentation tool, drum roll please, Microsoft Excel. And a lot of people groan, oh, it's so manual, it's so tedious. And I'm sorry I have to be the one to tell you, yes, it is. That's just part of the job. The last reason I believe network admins don't do documentation is because they have no template or storage location. So every network they come to, they try and recreate something in Excel that looks a little different than the last one. And then they get frustrated and then they start Googling for automated tools that would just fix this all for them. And then they get tired and shove the sheet of paper in their bag and it gets crumpled up. You see how this thing plays out. Well, that's what I'm here to give you in this nugget. I'm here to tell you there is no dream tool. Network documentation takes work. But what I want to do is change it from confusing work into just hard work. Because you know what? Most people like to do hard work. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. It's the confusing work that demoralizes people. There's a big difference between the man who doesn't do something because he doesn't know how, and the man who simply doesn't want to do something because he's lazy. Usually that man ends up in the unemployment line. My goal is to eliminate the confusion and just make it hard work. Core tool, Microsoft Excel. And I realize we live in a modern world where there's a lot of alternatives to Excel that you might prefer. Google Sheets, Smartsheet, OpenOffice, whatever. Just a spreadsheet is all you need with columns and rows. Then combine that spreadsheet with a cloud-based system for on-site work. We all have so many devices these days, a laptop, a desktop, our smartphones and tablets. And what happens to a lot of documentation is we forget it on a machine, or we can't remember where we stored it. Pick your storage location, whether you go with the public cloud or you create your own private cloud. For example, I use Synology NAS's network attached storage. They have their own little operating system, their own little spreadsheet application, their own little Dropbox-like thing called CloudStation. And it just synchronizes between all my devices. And I run it myself because I have an intrinsic untrust of public clouds. But I also think that people are following me and that they did capture aliens in Area 51. So you might just call me a little paranoid and use public cloud, and that's fine. Once you're done with the on-site work, store it securely somewhere. And again, that could be the public or private cloud, could be in an encrypted folder. Essentially, this is the roadmap of your network. You don't want to have it fall into the wrong hands. Okay, so now we need to answer the question, what do you document? Because there's a lot of things that you can document. What are the most important? That's what you see here listed on the screen. I split them into two groups, one labeled critical and one labeled useful. The things that are critical are the things that save you a huge amount of time anytime there is a network issue to be had. You'll find a lot of network administrators that don't have documentation try to rediscover their network anytime there's a problem. They'll remember an IP address in the back of their head and try and telnet to it, and if they can log into that device, they'll start trying to do show commands like show MAC address table to find out where things are plugged in. And all that does is cost them time, and at the end of the day, cost the company a lot of money. Because while the network is down, people aren't able to work. So a physical cable map, specifically, where do the patch panel ports go? If I'm looking at a wall jack, is there some type of label that I can just glance at the patch panel and know exactly where that port is without having to pull out my toner? Switch port mapping. What is plugged into each switch port? At a minimum, the key connections. It may not be as necessary to document every single computer, but things like servers, inter-switch connections, wireless access points, firewalls and routers, things that can have a large impact if they are disconnected, should be listed on that switch port mapping. Service provider connection and contact information. Who provides your internet access? What's their phone number? What's your contact? What's your account number or circuit ID? It's really common for the internet access to go down. What you want to be able to do is pull up a quick document that saves you all the time trying to Google on your smartphone and figure out what number you can call. IP address allocation. Who has what IPs? A network diagram. Just a quick visual representation showing what is plugged into what. The data of that overlaps with the switch port mapping. This simply shrinks the time it takes to understand the network connections exponentially from trying to understand them by just looking at an Excel spreadsheet. Now you might be thinking, well, you can't draw a network diagram in Excel. Oh, yes, you can. I'll show you that in a second. Credential vault, meaning what are the usernames and passwords to the switches? There are a ton of credential managers out there. My personal favorite is this little one called Password Safe. But I don't even want to get into the thousands of them that are out there. Some of them are cloud-based. Some of them automatically fill in your credentials. And I will say my personal opinion is if you can ensure the security of this spreadsheet and store it in an encrypted location, it's fine to list the credentials right in there. Otherwise, rely on a password manager like PWSafe. Now we drop down to the useful documentation. The first of those is the rack layout. And I almost listed this as critical, but then I thought to myself, I'm doing that just because it's so easy to create these. I'm not talking about a Visio wire schematic or anything like that. I'm talking about taking a picture with your cell phone and sticking it in whatever documentation you create. That can be so useful when you're not on site and you're trying to walk somebody through it remotely, to where you can literally say, the third one down, yep, that one right there. You see the red cable? Those kind of things just aren't reflected in an Excel spreadsheet without having a visual picture of it. The WAP layout is very useful. Where are your wireless access points installed in the ceiling? Asset tracking, all the serial numbers and warranty dates and purchase dates and put in production dates of all the different devices in your system. And lastly, the spanning tree protocol snapshot that I just kind of crossed out there. This shows what links are actually active on that picture. So let's just say you have a network diagram like this and spanning tree has blocked that link. You would just draw a picture and you would label it as the STP layout, showing only the active connections. That way, if there's a problem, you usually know right where to look. I was recently talking to an aspiring network engineer, and we were talking about network documentation, and I brought up Excel, and he kind of went, I said, what? He's like, I'm not good at Excel. I've never learned Excel. And I thought to myself, he probably represents a lot of people out there that never dove into Excel, but it puts me at a divide because I know some of you are Excel ninjas. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to build network documentation from scratch. I know some of you might go, this is easy, but just be patient. I'm going to go really fast through it because I know people can rewind, but I really want to make sure that I have everybody on the same page. So blank spreadsheet. First thing that I do, create 3 tabs, plus sign on the bottom. Double click the first one, name it switch map. Double click the second one, name it switch data. Double click the third one and call it network diagram. Good. Then come up to cell A, type in source information. Tab over twice to cell C, type in destination information. Then come down to row number 2, cell A, type in switch name. Cell B, type in port number. Cell C, I'll call wall jack / port number. Cell D, location, description. All right, now grab your mouse, click this highlight in the upper left corner, which highlights everything, and I'm going to double click that bar between A and B, which spaces all the cells so that we have everything correctly spaced between them. Highlight all of those things, home menu, let's go bold. I'm then going to highlight A and B, home menu, merge and center. Actually, let's just tack this menu to the top for now. Highlight C and D, merge and center. Then add a little splash of color. I always like this top row right here where it's real faint, but not so faint that you can't tell what color it is. And it adds a nice divide between, in this case, source and destination. I'm going to use a soft blue and a soft green. Then highlight all these rows. Just kind of drag that arrow across from A to D. Click the drop down on the grid lines and turn on all the borders. And let's add a little special border right here for source information. We'll just surround that with a thick border and then surround this one with a thick border as well. Now we've got a clean divide between source and destination. Now some of these are going to be a little bit longer field, like the location description. Maybe the switch name needs a little bit more room. I'm actually going to take number off of there so it's a little bit shorter. That's just going to be a number, so we don't need that much space. I'm going to center the text in columns B and C. Then I'm going to type in our switch names. RT-ST1, that's suite 1, SW1. And I know I totally changed my name from S1 to SW1, but that's okay. Do a control C on that field. Highlight the next, say 52 lines because that's going to represent our port, and paste it in there. On the port number, I'll just type a few, 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to highlight these guys and grab that little box in the lower right-hand corner and drag that thing down because Excel is smart, and Excel will automatically number that counting up. And it looks like I got up to number 50, so we'll go a couple more down there, and we'll just paste that in right like that as well. And then you realize that you did all of this on your network diagram. That's not the tab I meant to be on. So I'm just going to call that network diagram 1 for the time being. Drag that thing over there to the left. Drag the switch map over here to the right. We'll name this guy network diagram. And come back here and name this switch map. There we go. That makes me feel better. And I'm sure there's some people out there that's going, I don't know what you're doing, Jeremy. Because this is what this is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, highlight it all the way down to that port number 52. Control C. Put it in here and Control V. Change this to switch number 2, Control C, highlight all this all the way down, Control V. You see what I'm doing here? I'm repeating the same process, creating a full list of port numbers on here. Now comes the fun part. This is where you get to go in and type in where each one of those ports are going. For example, looking back at our network topology, we've got port 52 on the Suite 1 switch, RT-ST1, SW1, connecting over here to port 28 on the Suite 4 switch. I also see that port 49 and 50 are connecting from S1 down to S2 in suite number 1. So I'd come back to my worksheet, scroll on down to port number 52 of switch 1, and I would type in that's connecting to port 28 over on RT-ST4-SW1 over there. And as we just saw, port 49 and 50 connect to RT-ST1 SW2. Copy paste. And that's to the mirrored ports, 49 and 50. I'm also seeing that we reserved that port 51 for a future connection if we ever run additional cables between the two office suites. So I'm just going to put that in there. This is reserved to connect to port 27 of RT-ST4-SW2. And just so I know it's not active, I'll just do a -- reserved. Ooh, by the way, anytime you put dashes, Excel thinks you're subtracting. So it's going to treat that like a formula and give you an error. If you want to overrule that, just put a little hash in front of that. See that little tick mark? It's the one right next to your / key on the keyboard. When you hit enter, it actually makes that little hash disappear and keeps your mathematical formula. If you double click it, you see the hash reappear again. There's an old movie where this manager named Stan was talking to one of his employees about the number of flare pieces that they were wearing. And he was kind of reviewing them and saying, well, you just don't wear enough flare. And the employee was like, well, you said it was 10 minimum. And Stan was like, well, yeah, but do you really want to be known as a minimum person? Because right about now, you're probably thinking, Are you serious? I'm going to put that in for every single one of these ports, showing what they connect to and what device is over on the other side? And I would say, my friend, if you are all about flair, or if you're paid by the hour, I would say absolutely yes. Scroll up and fill in every single one of these ports. But what a lot of people will do is they'll put in the key ports. Like, for instance, let's just say, and I don't know this, let's just say that this connected to the internet router, and maybe it's the ETH0 port on that. Maybe port 2 connected to the primary server, and we'll just say NIC1 on that primary server. Now, whatever description is used for the Ethernet cards on those devices is what we're looking at for the destination information. But all the other stuff, those minimum flare people, would just be assumed to connect to other wall jacks and PCs and WAPs, but it's not that important. So they would delete all that stuff and just have the key ports, I can say that without squeaking, key ports, added to the spreadsheet. And if there was ever a port that would be considered key in the future, they would just insert a line in there, copy that down, and add in that port information. Like, for instance, let's just say port 20 connected to ETH0 of the accounting cubicle WAP. And here's what I would suggest. If you've never done documentation before, or you have a reputation for ignoring documentation, then start off with the minimum amount of flair. You'll really start falling in love with documentation, I believe, and start adding more and more flair as you go. This, plus all the other switches in your organization, is what you would want under the switch map worksheet. All right, head over to the switch data tab. I'm going to give you what I would call the minimum amount of flair on this tab, and then we'll add in some more useful information beyond it. All right, so 5 columns: switch name, tab over, model, tab over, serial number, tab over, MAC address, tab over, IP address. Highlight the whole thing, double click, expand the ones that you know are going to take a little bit more room, and I like just having a little fudge room in between them anyway to give myself a gap. Highlight those things. Let's make those. We'll make them a light, or I don't like a light orange. Let's go light gray. Bold, bottom border underline. Actually, let's just do this. We'll go grid lines all the way through. So expand that out. Switch name RT-ST1-SW1. Control C, Control V. Highlight those guys, Control C, Control V, and we'll go Suite 4. Good. This is Cisco SG300-28P on both of these guys, and these guys are Cisco SG300-52MP. Just dictates the amount of power over Ethernet they can provide. Then I would type in the serial number. Where can you get that? Well, there's some show commands that'll give it to you, but since I don't have a telnet prompt in front of me, love that guy. We'll just pull open a web browser and go to 10.225.1.240, which is one of the IP addresses. Log in. There we go. And hit the status and statistics page. Ooh, and now that I look at it, it's a 52P, not 52MP. Bring our spreadsheet up and fix that. Paste it over. Come back to the switch. There's the base MAC address. The switch can actually generate its own MAC addresses. It can create more based on the number of VLANs it has. We'll talk more about that in the VLAN series, but it's very useful to know what that base MAC address is. Toss that right there in the MAC address field. Shoot back here. There's our serial number. Copy that out of there and paste it into Excel. By the way, if you're brand new to Excel, you want to double click into the cell to get the blinking cursor and paste, because then it just puts the text and doesn't copy over any formatting or larger font sizes or anything like that. IP address, obviously, we just typed that in to get there. Copy it out and paste it in. Thanks, Chrome, for adding HTTP, but I don't need it. That's your minimum amount of flair. This information would be really handy if you're doing any kind of management or monitoring or anything with these switches. A couple extra useful fields that I would suggest, drag that over to get the formatting and delete all that out, would be the purchase date, in-service date, meaning when did you install it, warranty, and firmware version. Expand those out, just double click that bar in between them, highlight and add some grid lines. Filling in this information right here will give you a quick glance if the thing is still under warranty. It'll make sure that all the switches have the same firmware version, because it's a discipline. As you update your firmware, you're going to do it on every single one, so you don't get weird bugs that kind of percolate their way into the system. That's the switch data tab. Now on to the last tab, which is network diagram. Now I know you might be thinking, how do you build a network diagram in Excel? Well, easy, especially if you've got the template built already. Here's how. Head on over to the Insert tab, First thing you want to do is insert a shape. We're going to go over here to the circle, draw a nice little circle, which usually represents a router or a firewall. I'm going to right click on that guy, go to Format Shape, bring up my little menu over here because I don't like that dark blue. I always like my soft color. So I'll make him a yellow, move him up a little bit, then add a text box. So I'm going to put a little text box in there and I'll put name. Control A to select all, Control B to bold it, and we'll center that right in the middle. In that text box, I'm going to say I don't want any fill in there, and I don't want any line on there, so that way it just blends right with it. I'm going to highlight that, Control-click the circle in the background, and right-click and hit Group Together. That way, they're all seen as one object, and I can move them around just like that. Now, hold the Control key down on your keyboard, take that object, and drag it, and drag it, and drag it. However many circles you think you're going to need for your network diagram, go to town. Now, back to the Insert tab. Shapes, drop down, go to the square. This is typically your switches. Change that to maybe a soft blue. Add our text box to it. Center, bold, name in all capitals. Remove the fill, remove the line. Click the rectangle in the background and group those guys together. Again, Control, click and drag, Control, click and drag, Control, click and drag. That looks like about 4 switches, right? And wouldn't you know it, Microsoft was even kind enough to include a nice little cloud here. That can represent the internet. Stormy cloud. Now, when you're creating this Excel document, I'm going to want you to save something like this as a template. I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll come back to that. Add a few lines for yourself. I'm going to drag one across right about there. We'll change that to a black. Width of about 2 points. That looks good. Control, click and drag, Control, click and drag, drag, however many lines you'd want for yourself, right? Now imagine you had this as your template. Let me just shrink these windows around a little bit. It's really easy when you're on site, as you're doing all this documentation, to just come in here and say, okay, that's going to be RT-ST1-SW1. And I made it a little small. We'll widen it a little bit. There we go. Drag that over here. And just copy it down like that. That'll be switch number 2. Control click and copy it across like this. This will be suite number 4. Control click like this. And that's switch number 2. Then we just take and drag our lines and, whoa, like who could have planned that better? It's like the exact size. Drag those together like this. Grab that guy, line them up real quick like that. Control C, Control V, those things together. I'll highlight both of them. Hold down my Control click and drag that over there. Look at that. Now you might just add a few more text boxes for yourself. There's our text box. And just use some numerals like 49. Make that a little bigger, bold it. Format the shape with no line and no fill. And now you've got your template for your port numbers. Like that. Control C, Control V. Like that. Control drag that over. We'll change that to 50. Control drag that up, and there's our 50. Now, right now, you're thinking one of two things. Jeremy, that is awesome. That's what I want you to think. Or some of you are like, I could so do that so much easier in Visio. And I would say that's great. If you really like drawing network diagrams in Visio, and I've done that a ton, do it. The reason I like doing a quick sketch like this, I'm not going to go detailed. I'm not going to go Visio-style diagrams in here, dotted lines, etc., etc. I'm just filling this in to where I have a quick sketch of the network topology so that when I come to this site, which I haven't in 3 years, let's just say, I can click on that network diagram tab and go, ah, that's exactly what it looked like. Name this guy Firewall 01, even though we haven't gone there yet. And you can see as I'm kind of jumping around here, it's a little cumbersome. You're using Excel to do this. I'm sure when Microsoft designed Excel, they weren't thinking, oh, let's create something that makes killer network diagrams. But I'll tell you what, works pretty well. Go Microsoft. Just line up those last few links. There you go. Now, this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it. I'm only labeling ports just as a demonstration. You would go in and label every single one of the ports that at least were relevant to the network diagram or the skeleton of the network. Here's my port number 1. Center that guy. Look good? All right, last thing that I'll mention is you can add as many tabs that you want to this. Like, for instance, one of the ones I would say would be worth adding would be photos. Because after all, Excel is a free-for-all template. This is where you could go in and stick in those photographs that you took of your rack and, put some labels underneath so you can quickly reference, oh, okay, that's switch. No, this was actually before I stuck my labels on the switches. So you might want to write in there which switch numbers those are. Or if maybe you used a different tool for network diagram, you might take a picture, like a screenshot of that, and throw it into this Excel spreadsheet as well. The goal is to put all your network documentation in one place, and that's why I love Excel so much. It's unlike many of the other tools which try to structure you and pre-populate fields and everything else, Excel is just a landscape where you can do whatever you want. The important thing is that you remember to do a template for yourself. Keep yourself in order. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, you will be able to create relevant network documentation for your switch infrastructure. And now I'd like you to do it. Your practical exercise is to create a documentation spreadsheet for your environment. At a minimum, ensure all key connections, there's your minimum flare, and switch information is documented. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.